What's up, fuckers? We're back. Took a little bit of a hiatus there, but doesn't matter. We're back. We're going to get back in here. We're going to talk about some role-playing games with me. I'm your host. Let's get to the guys here. There's me, and there's the other guy. I'm your host, Matt.
And I'm David.
And for today, we're recording this right before our very first session of Barbarians of Lemure. How long do you think our session is going to be tonight?
I would say probably normal length. Well, you are working in the morning, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to not keep you up too much past midnight there. Thinking that we can probably get one shot in. I originally had slated this. It was going to be the first one I did with all three of you, and I was going to do it in like 3 parts, like 3 sessions. Well, you know what? I can probably compress this down into a fairly action-oriented 2-player session because things take longer the more players you have.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I can probably condense this down and then maybe do something a little more epic for our first session with Patrick too. So I'm thinking it'll probably be pretty normal, but I guess if we're running short on time, then I guess we can kind of cut it short. But
all right, I like to think of it as going to be a nice little introduction adventure, and giving us plenty of shit to talk about on the show next week. But for today, I got some stuff that's Dave has been out of the country for a little while, so I got some stuff to ease him back in. Recently, I peruse Reddit quite often in my own time and for the show here. And I don't know how it happened, but all of a sudden on my For You page or whatever your home page is, and they just kind of throw stuff out there that you might like. r/VTM has been popping up a lot recently for me. And I saw some titles and I got really intrigued and I just read them. So this is kind of like a community question style, but it goes against the rules of community question because I've already read them.
Okay.
So they can't be community questions. So I got 2 of them here that I thought I'd read to Dave because I thought they were pretty interesting in how people play VTM now and the way that their heads think. Because David and I have had many discussions and we've thought about how to play Vampire the Masquerade as well as how it should be played and all that. And I kind of dug how some of these guys had questions like, how does this work as a new VTM player? And I think you'll kind of dig this too. The first one I want to start with. Now, I want to iterate that this one is specifically Dark Ages. It's a Dark Ages vampire. For those out there that don't know, there are technically 3 different settings for vampire. There's Dark Ages Vampire, Vampire the Masquerade, and Vampire Bloodlines, which was the technically 4th edition, which took place during Gehenna, which is kind of like, it's the Vampires Ragnarok. It's their end times sort of thing. But this one is Dark Ages, which of course, Dark Ages, medieval fantasy style, but you're vampires. All right. With this comes from, what was his name? Connect Culture 7 on RVTM with the title, How Exactly Does a Toreador Fight? I know how a Brujah and Gangrel could plausibly fight, but a Toreador? I'm not trying to make a Warriador, but is a Toreador boxer / wrestler / soldier possible? His or her obsession would be something else like movies or art, but it wouldn't hurt for one to know combat skills, would it? I know strength / dexterity play a big part into having decent combat skills. How would Auspex, celerity, and presence help boost their skills? What are some examples of a Toreador, quote unquote, having hands, swordsmanship, or even gun skills?
Wow. Some of the things he mentioned in there don't seem, first of all, gun skills in movies don't seem like they're in line with a Dark Ages campaign. But we're just going to kind of
I think he was
that.
just talking about Toreadors in general.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Because I think their new clan weakness is no longer, what was it in when we played?
It's when they're and they can easily get enraptured by things of great beauty.
Yeah, and I think that what it is now in fifth edition is actually called, like, what did he call it in here?
Obsession.
Um, Obsession. That's what it is.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the not all clans are built for combat, and frankly, in VTM, the combat's usually an aside. If you're fighting something, you've probably done something wrong in the story up to that
Mm-hmm.
point. Uh, but in a medieval fantasy, actually Dark Ages fantasy, it's not even medieval. It's like pre-medieval.
Yeah. It's the Dark Ages.
Right. So that to me would lend itself toward more deft combat, something that would probably be more in line with somebody in the Renaissance. So, but yeah, you if you're really not trying to break the era, there's not likely to be any swashbuckling or fencing or foils, which are more uh, deft and dexterity oriented. It's a little confusing to me that he would say, "How would you use celerity in combat?"
Yeah.
Celerity
Right.
is like the best thing to use. It's pretty much only useful in combat, from what I can tell. But maybe the more recent iterations of Dark Ages tinker with it a little bit. I don't really know,
Maybe. I don't know.
but being incredibly fast seems like it would be a pretty big advantage. So, trying to think of like Auspex increases your awareness and
Mm-hmm.
presence increases your
Just makes people fucking love you.
or hate you or fear you, which
Yeah.
can be
True.
very useful in combat. You could conceivably use those to intimidate, allure, enchant enemies toward a specific end. Uh, it's difficult to conceptualize kind of what combat looks like when you're not doing a tactical grid style combat.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say anytime that if you're using a discipline, like in particular Auspex, increases awareness. So awareness of the battlefield, of what enemies are doing, what their motivations are. High enough levels of Auspex allow you to, I believe, read people's thoughts and shit,
Mm-hmm.
which seems a pretty big advantage if you're squaring off against somebody in like a melee situation, knowing what their intent is. The trick would be probably trying to tinker with how those things work alongside a combat mechanic. If I'm going to use Auspex to read someone's thoughts, or I'm going to use presence to try to cow them or sway them, do I do that in lieu of a combat action? Or can I do it as part of an action where I would be attacking as I'm going to do this before and then I'm going to attack? Because there's no real mechanics for action economy in the fighting. It typically just presumes that you get to do a thing on your turn.
Mm-hmm. Unless you
But
have
if
enough
you allow
celerity, then you can do seven things on your turn.
one for each extra point of celerity you have, but
Mm-hmm.
but but celerity is also a physical speed,
Mm-hmm.
right? It wouldn't necessarily make you be able to like read someone's thoughts and then
No.
attack, like because why would you have like a quicker ability to, I don't know, think faster just because you have celerity? So you'd probably need to hammer out some sort of system where you're allowing those disciplines to be used in a combat scenario, but balancing it against, whether you're sacrificing an attack or you're doing it as part, because both have their problems. One would be like you say, okay, you can use your Auspex to increase your awareness, right? Maybe getting a sense of where everybody on the battlefield is or what they're intending to do in a small scale skirmish, reading their thoughts, perceiving their aura to get an idea of their emotional state or something to that effect, which could give you a benefit on an attack, right? If you know something about someone's motives, someone's emotional state, subtle cues that they're likely to do X, Y, or Z would probably provide you with an advantage. But is that advantage that you get big enough to sacrifice an attack because you don't want to provide an incentive to not do those things, because then the players won't leverage those skills if they go, well, it's a bigger benefit to just attack them than it is to do this thing ahead of time. But if you allow them to do both, especially for things that don't require a willpower point or a blood point or something like that,
Hmm.
then you very quickly could just be like, well, I could use these powers every turn and they would just be better on like full stop better, right? Like,
Right.
then you would very quickly have an overpowered clan vampire that is for a clan vampire that's not really designed to be a combatant. So that's the tricky balance for me is I wouldn't know how to really do that.
Mm. Well,
In
I'm surprised you didn't bring it to when I read this, first of all, um, because he put in there, but is a Toreador boxer, wrestler. Like, these are martial arts. And
Mhm.
Toreadors are all about the arts, and martial arts are still it's an art. It's even a performance. Uh, they just like to take whatever art that they do and they wanted to make it, the nth degree of it. So they would probably be the absolute best at it. Otherwise, they would strive to be the best in order to make this beautiful, performance that is fighting. Um, and in the Dark Ages books, if I remember right, because you had the core book and I read through it like once or twice,
Mm.
but I remember it said that Toreador was a part of the High Clans. Then it was Bruja, Ventrue, Toreador, and
Tremere?
no, because I don't even think Tremere was in Dark Ages, was it?
Yeah, you're right. They're not even around yet.
I can't remember.
Um,
There was one more. There's like four High Clans,
mhm,
but they were all knights. They were like
mhm.
knights and nobles. So a knight, no, you don't have to be good at combat as a knight, but you're usually pretty good with a sword if you're a knight, and of course mounted combat. Just to throw some stuff out there, like he was talking about. But yeah, Toreadors. Whenever I hear Toreador, I don't think warrior very much.
It's well, the peculiar thing with it is it's like, okay, again, are you trying to keep this time period specific? Because frankly, like if it's a medieval setting, you're not going to have a lot of people doing hand-to-hand combat. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not, you have armor and you have horses and you have melee weapons. This is largely the way people fought. They're, unless you're setting it in like feudal Japan or something where maybe martial arts would have been a thing, but I mean, make no bones about it, martial arts are old, but I don't think we really have a scare of how long ago the Dark Ages are. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about like this, like 1,000 plus years ago. It's like that's a pretty long time ago. Um, so the likelihood that a lot of these disciplines would be available and something that someone would study, like you would have to think that they would study it as a human, in which case, why would you learn like a martial art in a world where people largely fight with swords? As
Mm-hmm.
a vampire, that might seem like an attractive proposition, but you would have no incentive to do it. It's the reason that there's not a lot of people that really are sword fighters in the modern era because that's not how people fight. They fight with guns now.
Right.
And so you would just that would just be a waste of your time and energy and you would just get killed like immediately. And so that seems to kind of break the idea, right? Like a boxer boxing is like, okay, that hasn't really been a discipline for but maybe 100 years. So you need to be thinking in terms of like the Dark Ages are largely lawless and savage time. I believe that's the reason that they set it in that era because it's like vampires can kind of thrive in this lack of structure. I mean, yeah, there's likely feudal lords and stuff like that, but
Mm.
I mean, the area is very sparsely populated and most people are pretty ignorant of most things, right? Like so a legacy of something like martial arts is not likely to be around in a world like that. So I don't really know how to contend with that.
Oh, okay. So there's some good comments in here, like this one here. All who think that, Toreador can't fight, die, turning to dust when they are destroyed by a cleverly fired bullet, torn apart by a sword under their celerity. You can imagine any fighter from a knight, a Spanish fencer, a Landsknecht, a Melmook, in general, any of the quote unquote invincible warriors. In the art of eliminating enemies, mastering your weapon to its heights, this is what the Toreador is capable of. And that's what I was kind of talking about when they find that art form that they want to master, they will do whatever they have to in order to master it.
It's
if what you're going for, even though he said that he doesn't want to make a warrior door, it sounds like you want to make a warrior door.
it's well, if you want to argue that like sword play is an art, then yeah, absolutely it
Hmm.
is. But then you're talking about yeah, getting into a warrior door. It's like I don't. You're. It's just like any role playing game. It's like look if you don't have combat statistics, then you have other statistics, right? And
Yeah.
players have an incentive to build characters that they think will jibe with the sort of challenges you're likely to put in front of them. And your players, if they are in a medieval setting, a Dark Ages setting, and know that there's going to be lots of melee combat, they're probably not likely to they're probably not likely to play a Toreador. And if they do, they're likely to give them some combat skills. I mean, archery could arguably be more in line with a Toreador because archery is more of an art form. It's like used to be kind of like unless you were a century archer, the people that took up archery were women and kind of noble types.
Hmm.
They took it up as a recreation because that's also how you would hunt, right? And so it was considered more of a kind of like a gentlemanly art than swinging a battle axe. So yeah, that makes sense, but there's really no way to end around it with the concept of a Toreador unless you want them to just be a combat-oriented version of that
Yeah.
clan.
I think Toreadors are more powerful as presence and dominant
Mm-hmm.
uh, style characters anymore, more of the social characters, because
Mm-hmm.
that is where their power comes from. Presence alone. Presence is one of the most. It's one of the disciplines that I took for granted when we originally first started playing Vampire.
Yeah.
Holy shit! I never even when you get to actual the 5 dots of presence is called awe, and there's a
Yeah.
reason that that's all it is, awe, because that's
Yeah.
all you can do. You come from. I think in the description it says they would come from miles to come
Yeah.
and kneel before you.
It's a Toreador is more likely to be a battlefield commander
Hmm.
than he is an actual warrior. Um, because yeah, dominate and presence, like if they're turned up high enough, that you don't need combat. Remember, we did this with my brother Jason. We played our second VTM campaign, and he was a real combat oriented character in the first campaign or Chronicle. The first Chronicle, he's really combat oriented. He's like, I want to go completely the other direction. He's like, I'm going to play. I think he played it was either a Toreador or
It
who
was a
else gets
Tremere.
like, who else gets presence?
Oh, I Ventru would get
Ventru.
presence.
Yeah. He's like, I'm just going to like turn that dial all the way up. And so we played, and it was like I had planned on this chapter of a story taking the evening and the story taking, 5 or 6 chapters. But it was like every time you came up against something, my brother was just like, "Oh, I'm going to use this," and I have like 8 dice on my die pool. Like, do I need to roll? It's like, nope. Okay, well he just lets you in, right? Like,
Yeah,
okay, well like these guys were like seemingly they might be kind of hostile to you, but now they're not. Now they're your friends, and they just will do whatever. You don't even have to do the thing you were going to go do. You can just have them do it for you.
yeah,
It's just like you can just kind of power through a lot of blockades because combat always comes down to someone else being hostile to you. And if you have like a magic bullet that prevents that because you can make them like you, make them afraid of you, make them fall in love with you, it possess their mind in the case like dominate, like you just turn them into your thralls. You don't need to fight. And it's really no reason for it. And
hmm,
so that's part of the reason that I never really cared for the Dark Ages D&D game because it was like, look, the whole drama of a lot of narrative in VTM, if you're playing it like a game of personal horror, is predicated on civilization. And it's predicated on typically dense civilization. There's a reason that not a lot of Vampire the Masquerade Chronicles take place out in rural Wyoming or take place out in the farms of the Midwest. They're usually in highly dense populations in metropolitan areas where there's a lot of connectivity and that corruption of the vampire and everything is an urban creature. This isn't a werewolf game, right? It's an urban creature.
hmm,
And so when you set it in the Dark Ages and you give them swords and armor, and you say, okay, like this is like a feudal, like savage world where they're like, settling things with violence more because there is no civilization, there's no infrastructure, there's no power structures. it just seems to kind of like rob the whole like benefit of a vampire game. And then it's like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to put them up against, because it's a set in the Dark Ages, but it's not a fantasy game. You know,
Yeah. No.
it's not like there are like dragons and shit for you to
Nope.
fight. So it's like, what are you just going to populate it with a bunch of vampires and werewolves? And it's like, but the world is very, very sparsely populated, and there's these monsters like all over the place for you to fight. That
Yeah.
doesn't seem right. But then there's not enough people to pose a threat to you in any sort of organized way. And even if there were, like mortals are really no threat physically to vampires. So then you go, where does the conflict and drama come from? Because you don't have, it's not like you have like this shadowy corporation that you're trying to like infiltrate or convince or negotiate, or you know, like the clan structure of the vampire society, and the, you know, all these things that are where you would set the drama. And in the Dark Ages world, I was just kind of floundering as to like, how do I make this a thing? It just feels like
Yeah.
D&D with some vampire powers, and that doesn't seem to be in the spirit of the game. So I'm impressed people still play that version. It seemed like it just would fail pretty hard.
I thought so too. I never saw the benefit, or not the benefit, but the draw to Dark Ages.
Hmm.
Like I said, you had the book, and I looked through it quite a bit. And yeah, there were. I don't think there was Camarilla and Sabat yet, but they weren't factions. I think they might have even went by bloodlines.
Yeah.
Uh,
You remember better than I do. I don't even remember that.
well, yeah, there were because I did. I was like, this is different, but it's the same, and they want to be D&D, but it can't be D&D because there's just humans and vampires, but
Yeah.
there's no structure to it because there was no Camarilla or Sabat, so there was no like governing agency. There was no
Yeah,
any of
because
that.
it's too, the whole concept of VTM is precisely that you exist in a very deterministic world, right?
Hmm.
You are constrained and you are relegated by vampire society
Yeah,
to a
by their
certain role,
laws.
by their laws and their rules, and you do not exist in mortal society in any way that's fulfilling. So it's trying to carve out like some sense of purpose or goals for yourself, and thus the existential dread of the game. But in a almost like, I mean, the Dark Ages world is almost like the Wild West. Like everything is open. You have total liberty and freedom. There's no power structures holding you down. You're just a god among men,
Yeah,
and you do whatever you want. Where does the conflict come from? Where it's like, even if you ran amok, if you walked into a village and you're like, I'm a vampire, and it's like, you know, do that in inner city Chicago, and like you might draw the entirety of the police force, and the whole society of mortals would be aware that you were a vampire. You broke the masquerade. There'd be severe consequences in vampire society. And
hmm,
also now maybe mortals would be hunting you and killing you.
yeah, right.
You,
You'd have to be
you
on the run from both your kind and humankind, and
Right, but in the Dark Ages world, you could just walk into an entire town and they pose no threat to you. You could just murder everyone in the
yeah,
town and then just
hmm,
move on. Like, it'd be great for murder hoboing, but it's not really good for like high stakes drama and
yeah.
tension and horror.
All right, let's get on to this next one here, which also comes from RVTM with the questioner with the nom de plume of Pencil Boy 99
Uh-oh.
with the title, "Why is anyone doing anything?"
Okay, sure, let's go.
I've run VTM on and off and played a bunch, but one thing that still puzzles me is why anyone is doing anything. Put aside for the moment faction based responses, e.g., you're vampires, so you need to 1. Hide slash misdirect hunters, 2. Deal with Sabat and Anarch slash Camarilla incursions, depending on what you are. In real life, I need to work and make money to live. If you're a vampire in a Camarilla Anarch domain, it's easy to make money. You can use disciplines to take it from people, just invest and let compound interest do its thing. And there's a fixed amount of blood you can drink once you have a territory or herd. It's not like more helps. It's not like money where you can buy a yacht or a private island. In Chronicles of Darkness, they kind of recognized this and gave some of the splats a built in job. Werewolves as spirit cops, Prometheans on a personal journey, etc. In World of Darkness, werewolves are Captain Planet terrorist superheroes. Mages are trying to change reality to make their magic easier or whatever. If you're low level neonate or whatever, then you need to do stuff because in order to stay in domain and feed, you need to report to people. So you need to move up the food chain. But after that, why are there people you report to doing anything? It's not clear what vampires are doing in World of Darkness to me.
It's okay. So some interesting things there to untangle, and amusing. Also, Captain Planet like terrorists is a very funny way to describe werewolves.
Yeah.
Uh, he even kind of misses the point about money. Like, if you had no mortal needs, you didn't need food, you didn't need shelter, you couldn't procreate, and the elements were no impediment to you.
Mm-hmm.
Why the fuck would you need money? Like,
Yeah.
if you didn't need a house and clothes and food, like, you wouldn't need money. Like, and a vampire doesn't need that, right? They can live in abject squalor and not get sick. They, sure, maybe they would enjoy the creature comforts of having a posh penthouse or whatever, but they don't really need it in the same way that you need it as a mortal. So the whole money thing is out the door. But in that realization is an acknowledgement of why the vampires do anything. And that's because, well, why do you want to upgrade a car? Why do you want a better job? You're not going hungry. You have a job and you have a whatever. So why is it that you want things when your needs are met? And this is where the kind of more existential horror comes in, is it's like you're just programmed to have ever renewing desires. You have ever renewing desires that you never stop wanting things, period. And when you really think about that, that's like kind of a terrifying thing. You're like, wow, that's just like you're never, ever, ever satisfied, period. And even if you didn't have mortal needs, you would still crave things like power and status and position. And so those reasons are the reasons that vampires would do something. Because when you remove most of the rules of human society, as VTM shows us, you kind of establish your own society, because you can't have mortals all knowing that there are vampires, because then that would be a problem. And then, you wouldn't be able to kind of prey on them. And so that is, I guess, the abridged answer, but it's, when you really think about it in terms of desire and consumerism, I mean, the vampire, in some ways, and certainly in the VTM world, is kind of a stand-in for that desire in like a market system almost. Is like, that's what it does. It preys on you, and it needs to prey on somebody to be successful, right? Like, you need to, in order to build a successful corporation, like, that has to come on the backs of some people. And not getting into like some sort of political discourse about whether that's exploiting them or whatever, but for most of human history, that's kind of how it was, right? There was just a finite amount of resources in the world, and this whole idea of creating wealth or creating resources was not a thing. Like, if I wanted a resource, I had to take it from someone that had it. Like, and vampires are much more predatory in that way. And so you could see them as the predatory nature of consolidated power, in which case it might be a commentary on socialism or communism, but you could also just see it as a predatory corporatism, and it could be a stand-in for capitalism or whatever. The fact is that when you build up a big enough power structure, there is a pecking order, and there can't help but be a pecking order, even if you remove yourself from mortal desires. And so what it's doing is it's positing for you as a player and for your characters to think about, if you removed all mortal desires, and had no conscience, because, or let's just say didn't have a conscience in the way that mortals have a conscience, right? If you looked at humans the way humans look at, let's say, chickens, you know, I don't have any ill will toward chickens, but I have no compunction about eating them.
Hmm.
And there are plenty of systems that are just like, I mean, like in the relative scale of like how humans treat chickens, we abuse and like totally degrade and have no respect for the fact that they have any sort of will in the world at all. We don't really give them a
Mm.
second thought. They're just food. And so if a vampire, if as a vampire, you suddenly like woke up and had a realization about that, like, okay, well, what would you pursue? What sort of things would suddenly matter to you? You wouldn't just kind of go, oh, well, I guess I'm fine and I'm content, right? I'm way more powerful than 99.9% of the world. What can I do? And that question typically comes with some pretty dark answers, and trying to grapple with that tension between what you could do and what you would want versus like what would be right or moral or whatever is where the tension of vampire typically comes in. So I don't know, like, you know, any thoughts on that front, Matt?
I wanted to give my when I first read this, a lot of things flooded my head because when I first read this, I thought it was pretty much saying, "Why do vampires get jobs?" Is kind of what I thought at first, and then I thought, "Oh yeah, why do they do anything?" Because they are like we were just talking about, kind of like these godlike beings that could do whatever the fuck they want with a, they could just make you think whatever they want. So if
Right.
they, and I was thinking about it like, oh well, you need money to still function as a person in the world. Like if a
A
Tremere
person,
wants,
sure, yeah,
yeah, if a
absolutely.
Tremere wants to go and buy this book that is like from a collector, that it's an old tome of spells or whatever, you got to pay for it. It's just like, oh, why don't they just dominate them and fucking
Right.
take it? Because, and I thought about this, and this is something that you told me years ago when we were playing Vampire, is that vampires don't want attention drawn to them. They are there to be invisible because as soon as people know that they're real, they're going to hunt them down and kill them all. And that's like the thing with the Camarilla and with the masquerade itself. You do not out yourself, and you do whatever you can to stay as invisible as possible. And with this, even when feeding, like vampires in Vampire the Masquerade don't normally kill their victims.
Not
They'll
typically.
just drain what they want, lick the wound to seal it up, and off they go. Because if people just start dying all over the place, then questions are going to be asked. Just like if a rare book goes missing from a collector, and there's no paper trail of or a receipt of sale, or even if the guy's just I don't remember giving it to anybody, blah blah blah. Uh, and with the money, it's they got to help feed their herd as well. If they have herd, if they have ghouls, they're going to need something as well, and usually they take care of them the best that they can. But it's mostly about blending in. And hell, there's some clans, fuck Toreador, Ventru, Lasombra, Giovanni. These four clans still think of money as power.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's status. It's not more. It's not really power, but status. But status is power and all that.
Right.
So they're always going to be all for it. But it helps them blend in, and not a lot of questions come back to them about you know being vampires of some sort, just like normal humans living in society. And that's why they do what they do, and they'll get jobs, or they'll try to have money of some sort. Sure, if they accidentally kill somebody, they might rifle through their belongings and take a few bucks out of their wallet or their credit card. Hell, Nosferatu, they're known for just hacking into people's banks and taking their money because they can't walk on the streets, without being like, ugh.
Yeah, but I mean, you kind of tapped into something there, which is like, okay, let's say you're a toreador, right? It's like, okay, you're like a musician, but like the likelihood that you have the drive to be a musician because you want to be rich and famous is not very
Right.
high,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're just, it's in your nature to kind of just be a performative
Yeah.
person. And the reason that vampires would value money is because humans value money.
Yeah.
And that's a way to have, like you said, power over them. Because frankly, that's not really what's at issue. It's not wealth that's at issue. You go like, well, this person makes more than the president. And it's like, yeah, like the president doesn't make a lot of money. And it's because, well, why would he need to? Like, the president doesn't pay for fucking anything,
Yeah.
right? He's got
Mm-hmm.
his own jet, he's got his own mansion, he's got like all these people to protect him. It's like the public pays for everything for the president. And
Mm-hmm.
so and he's the most powerful man in the world, so he's not paying to eat. He doesn't need money, because if you have enough power, you don't need money, because you can just get what you want from
Yep.
people. And a vampire is the epitome of that, right? Sure, maybe if you stole something or whatever, it might be easier to just purchase it. But that also comes with its pitfalls too. If you're trying to do clandestine things, then you would just use the method that's easiest to you. But I'm with the questioner that, like, the whole idea that, like, time is time is what would allow great wealth. It's the reason that older people tend to be richer than younger people, because you just have more time to accumulate wealth. So just
Mhm.
imagine you had no limit to how much time you could accumulate wealth. And imagine that you actually didn't need the money for anything. You
Yeah.
didn't need it for shelter. You didn't need it for food. You didn't need it
Yeah.
for anything. Like
You're not
that would
paying for
that would
gas for shit unless no, you don't even need it for that. Yeah, you're not paying for gas because you don't need to cook food. You don't have to heat your apartment.
Yeah, right. You don't need any of this shit. And so you could, like, if I just made what I make, but I didn't need an apartment, I didn't need food, I didn't want to smoke cigars, I didn't want to, like, drink
Hmm.
whiskey because I couldn't drink whiskey, like, I would very quickly be fairly wealthy.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh.
and so that's the kind of situation where you have with a vampire. It's like, yeah, I don't imagine that in the context of the game, it removes some of the mystique of a vampire to think that a vampire is a night clerk at a gas station or something, right? Like, that's just like, why would you do that, right? You would not do that, because you don't need to work a menial, like, humdrum job like that. But when you climb up that ladder high enough and you go, like, well, what's beyond it? What motivates me? I mean, VTM, the appeal of it for me is always that it's a very nihilistic game. It
Hmm.
posits the question of, like, like, if your life really had no meaning. And I mean,
Aha.
it doesn't, but but let's just say that was a reality for you. You could no longer delude yourself the way humans delude themselves into thinking that their lives have meaning and purpose.
Okay.
You
Okay.
just
Before you
knew.
get too far in, I want
Go
to
ahead.
bring up what I like to think of the undertone of this question
Sure,
because
go ahead.
this is the question that I saw when I read this because he talks about um, you know, fucking werewolves are the planet terrorists, superheroes. Mages are trying to change reality so that their magic works. Prometheans they have. So he's talking about all these other books from World of Darkness.
Hmm.
It seems like these creatures have goals or they have jobs already. They have
Hmm.
something to strive for. But to him, vampires, there's nothing to strive for is what I'm getting from him. He's just like, why would a vampire do fucking anything?
Well, that's kind of what I was driving at,
Yeah,
is
that's why
that
I wanted to bring that up as well.
it's
Uh,
part of the reason that vampires, the world of darkness, they are the linchpin of it. They are the linchpin, and it's why I don't really particularly care for the introduction of werewolves and fairies and all these other things in the world of darkness, because the vampire represents nihilism. It
mhm,
is a negation of everything. They don't have goals because they are parasitic by nature.
mhm.
They exist to negate, and so they capture things not because it will make them happy, but because it's taking away from someone else, or because they have some sort of psychological delusion that they believe they're what they're doing is they're striving to feel alive again, because
That's
that's something
exactly
that's
it.
gone forever for
Yep.
them. And, like, that's what I was getting at with, if you really realized that your life was just complete, your existence was meaningless and it was infinite, like, really ponder on that for a minute. You have no purpose in the world. You're parasitic, and the only way for you to even exist is to actively harm the things that are an organic part of the world. That's a fucking dark thought to sit with.
Hmm.
It's a really, really dark thought to sit with. And then when you ask yourself, like, well, what would you do? How would you behave? Like, would you sublimate that? Would you lean into it? Would you split the difference in some way? These are the interesting psychological and emotional questions that would arise out of a VTM game, and perhaps the other supernatural elements that have a purpose would just be a sounding board for that. They're
Hmm.
on offense and you're on defense. You're trying to just tear everything down, and you don't want to destroy the world, even though you probably could, because you have this ambivalent relationship with your own nature. Like vampires have a self-preservation instinct. They obviously don't want to not exist, but they likely have some self-loathing and disgust about what it is that they are and what it is
Exactly.
that
Yep.
they've become. And that's a really interesting, like philosophical meditation. And it's
Hmm.
part of the reason that I think VTM is not for the emotionally immature.
Yep.
Um,
Uh, I saw this again. This was something you brought up back in third edition Vampire. That vampires, well, depending because we played Camarilla a lot.
mhm.
Um, you said these guys, they they hold on to whatever humanity they have left.
Yeah.
They don't want the monsters to take over. They have a deep need of survival, and in order to do that, they have to hold back the monstrous side of themselves, and they have to be as human as possible. And I always thought that was very cool. And then when Vampire the Masquerade Fifth Edition came out, they really kind of put that into the rules. There's a mechanic for it called the Beast.
Yeah.
Whenever you do fucking anything vampiric or in the Vampire Society, you almost always have to. At least this is what it seemed when we played the. It was like a test game. I think it was
Hmm.
before the book even came out. We played it, and it was like you got to roll for the Beast every fucking time. I'm sure it's changed by now, but the goal, it's weird to say the goal of the game, but it is really, is just like David said all those years ago, is hold on to what humanity you have left, because being this monster that you have in the past and you've seen, like they make sure in the new book, in the new edition, to say that you have seen how monstrous you can be when you black out and oh fuck, what is it called when they go berserk?
Rage? No. Uh, it's frenzy.
Frenzy. When you frenzy, you go into a blackout and you just become this horrid monster, and then next thing you know, you wake up in in a pile of bodies and soaked in blood, and you don't know what you did, and you just see the aftermath, and uh, it it's that thing that you're trying to get away from. Otherwise, if you keep this up, you're going to be hunted down, and your whole existence is just going to go away. All your kind is just going to be hunted till the very end, uh, unless you're able to hold on to that little bit of humanity. And you got to think, maybe they are, maybe they weren't. They were turned. They didn't have the choice, that they were embraced and became a vampire, and they just have that little bit of humanity left in them that they can hold on to, that keeps them wanting to live. So I like to think, the thought of that is the vampire like goal, is to do
Hmm.
what they can to hold on to that humanity.
Well, and there's an interesting thing that's in there too, which is you could being turned into something that's clearly higher up on the food chain,
Mm.
superior in almost every way to humans, but still you're still existing in their world, a
Hmm.
world that they've built. And
There's still
so,
more of them than there are of you.
right. And so, in a way, because not only, I mean, you need them to feed upon, but you need to play by those rules. And I would imagine there could be some interesting psychological things that are in there. Because it's like, on one hand, you might have, like, okay, I've lost my humanity, and there's some sort of self-loathing or whatever. But there could also just be a resentment to this is kind of how the Sabbat looks at it. Like there's some sort of resentment
Hmm.
toward humanity. And because it would kind of be like being on a desert island with a bunch of people that had like an 80 IQ and you had like 170 IQ. Like you would be like, well, I'm clearly smarter than all these people. I'm clearly these people's better. But if I make that known, I'll just be ostracized.
Hmm.
And I kind of need them. Like I'll go mad without like someone to socialize with. So in some ways I have to play by the rules of all these retards.
Hmm.
and and you might have some bitterness and some resentment that goes pretty deep, especially given centuries to ruminate on it, right? That was always like an interesting dynamic to me that didn't seem like it ever got explored. Like you need the approval of these people that are clearly your lessers, and they're food for you. And quite, can you imagine a scenario where you would be seeking the approval and playing by the rules of chicken society?
Yeah.
Like chicken society. You would have to think, okay, I want there to be chickens around for me to eat. And if I treat them poorly, then the chickens will all run away and I won't have any food. But after a while, you would be like, why am I letting these chickens decide what I fucking do? Like, like I'm clearly like superior to them in every way that I can be.
I drive a car. Can chickens drive a car? I don't think so.
That one in the Wallace and Gromit movie can.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. All right. Well, I think that is a fantastic ending to this episode. Welcome back, Dave. Welcome back to the States. Welcome back to the show. I tried doing this without you, but I'll tell you what, it failed horribly. I am not one for just sitting there and talking to myself because there was a lot of empty air, and luckily nobody came and watched the live because I just sat here for about 25 minutes, and I think I said about 15 words, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do this. But if anyone out there, if you have anything to add on to this conversation, have you been playing Vampire? What do you think of the game? What do you think the actual object of the game is? What should other players that want to play Vampire be looking forward to, and what should be their thought process going into the game? Or do you want to know anything else that we can talk about? You can send it to insidethegmstudio@gmail.com. Let us know. Or, let us know if we're doing good. Are we doing bad? What can we do to be better? We want to hear from you. Let us know. Please give us some content to talk about. Or you can always come and watch us live at twitch.tv/InsideTheGM Studio. But for this week, for Inside the GM Studio, I have been your host, Matt.
And I am David.
A very good night.
Was it really that bad? Did you record it or no?
No, I did not record it. I deleted it immediately because literally I was here for about 25 minutes, like talking to myself. A lot of it was just what I was reading. I was reading off the screen, and then I'd sit back and I'd think, like, I think, there's some things I could talk about this, and I think, we can start with blah, blah, blah.
They're just like, I can't do it.
Yep. And I was like, I'm not going to fucking do this.
I wonder if I could do it. I don't know if I could. I mean, part of me thinks like, yeah, I could do that. I could talk. But for an hour straight, even a half an hour,
it's tough. Unless, like, I was hoping somebody was going to jump into the chat just so I could talk to them. Because I was like, man, if I could talk to somebody, then, maybe there's something better. But I'm not to the point yet where I can just read some shit off of, Reddit again and just be like, I got a story that I could tell about this.
Yeah, you need a lot of like input, right? You need a lot of like material. It's a little like being a stand-up comedian. You'd have to have like a lot of things that you want to talk about. So in case you dried up, you can move on to the next one. But yeah, I don't know that I could do it. I'd have to come up with like a topic, and here's the points I want to make, and like elaborate on each of these, and then kind of shift to this topic. But I couldn't just do it on the fly. That's for fucking damn sure.
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah. I'm sure with some practice I could probably do it, but not right now. All right, dude, I'm gonna try to grab some quick food before we start the game.
Yeah.
So I will see you in about half an hour.
26 minutes. Yes.
All right. See you then.
See you.